And for our folks over in Australia and New Zealand that were tuning in, because we did have two different Supercars drivers with Will Brown and Cam Waters racing, they're probably wondering, just like the rest of NASCAR fans, wait, where'd my driver go? And yes, congratulations. You guys got the full NASCAR American Fox experience there. Both those guys didn't end up finishing there. Waters 35th. And then where did Will Brown end up finishing there? I had 31st.
31st, yeah.
Yeah, he might have actually been a couple laps down, but I know at one point he was in the garage. But Cam Waters ended up DNFing, even though the broadcast did not really mention that. Tough day for them. Will Brown showed speed early in the weekend. I think he was third in practice. Mm-hmm. They said there was some kind of electrical gearbox issue that really kind of messed with his whole weekend there. But outside of the criticism with Fox and, not learning about them as much as we can and just really figuring out where they finished in the race, what did you think overall about their weekend and just their experience here?
I think obviously very cool. I think American NASCAR fans, anytime you see these guys coming over from Aussie Supercars, you are going to have a little bit of an elevated opinion just because of what SVG has done, whether it was last year in Chicago or this past weekend at Sonoma. I think it is very clear that there is a ton of talent in Aussie Supercars, especially when it comes to road course racing. As our comments said earlier in this week, if you could handle Bathurst, you could handle just about anywhere. And ultimately, it's a shame that there were so many issues with, from the technical side of, whether it be the electric gearbox issue or whatever, whatever Will Brown had going on. It just seemed like these are the types of opportunities that NASCAR can't miss on. And to have these guys come over and to have that extra buzz around this type of race, I mean, it's a random Sonoma race in the middle of June, kind of the sticking point of the season to where, you're just kind of waiting to get to the playoffs. So to have these types of drivers to be able to come and to put on a show and to really showcase their abilities, I think it really only helps the sport. Obviously, hopefully this is more than a one-off. Hopefully they come back and keep on trying to run these cars, because I think this is definitely a rising tide lifts all ships situation. And NASCAR has shown an interest in kind of getting into that international market, and this is the perfect way to do it.
100%. And you have Cam Waters, who's actually run multiple truck races already this year. Will Brown, the Supercars points leader, has expressed his pleasure in the running with RCR. So, that he obviously did take the Brodie Kostecki rumored seat from last year. My takeaway is that RCR 33 car that Kostecki ran the Indy road course last year, now Brown this year, is that it's shown speed ad. Both guys have been really fast in practice, and then something has happened mechanically to that car along the weekend that has just completely derailed it. So we really haven't been able to see their full talent on display. And like you said, Ad, we do rate them a little bit higher because of SVG's background and how he came into Chicago with that perfect storm to win. But these guys are some of the most talented drivers on the planet for a reason. I think, every motorsport entity, whether it's F1, IndyCar, NASCAR, even Supercars, we kind of put our heads in the sand and put ourselves in a bubble and say, oh, these are the best guys. But then you have someone like an SVG, a Will Brown come over, a Kyle Larson in IndyCar, and show that each of these series have so much talent. And I think that's the beauty of NASCAR with some of these open charters. That is, not only do these guys want to come over and compete, but it just shows the competition level, how it compares across international waters. It's fascinating to see how they all the fact that you had at COTA a couple months ago, Ricky Stenhouse and Kamino Kobayashi getting into it, one of the best touring car drivers in the world, and Ricky Stenhouse, it doesn't get any better than that.
No, and I think you're 100% right. Obviously this type of stuff can't happen in F1 just because of, the setup of how their system is. They've got obviously 2 drivers per team. You're not going to have like these one-off type of races. But, I think as far as, like you said, the Supercars, the IndyCars, NASCAR, just to have any sort of cross-pollination between these sports and to kind of have the different eyeballs look at the different series and, to kind of force us as race fans to take our heads out of our respective corners and saying, oh, well, our drivers are the best, to have guys so willing to be able to jump in the seat and say, okay, hey, we'll prove it. Let's see how I would do in a NASCAR. Let's see Kyle Larson. Let's see how I would run in the Indy 500. These are the types of things that if motorsports is going to continue to grow worldwide, I think these types of opportunities for drivers are paramount and are things that need to keep happening. Obviously, today the results weren't either of, whether Will Brown or Cam Waters wanted, but at the end of the day, just to have them in the car, I think, is a huge success, both for Aussie Supercars and for NASCAR as a whole.
And I agree 100% how you said a rising tide lifts all ships. It's the same way in motorsports. I think you and me are the same way. I know I catch myself paying attention to the Supercars results every week. I see, hey, I've seen some of those guys race before. I'm familiar with them now. You start to follow some of them on social media. I mean, Will Brown was at Cracker Barrel every single morning in America. He's a very likable guy from what I can gather, and I'm going to start paying attention to him more. And just for Supercars in general, I start to pay in. The indigenous schemes are coming out for a couple weeks out. Some of these cars are sick. And just you start to catch yourself in the fandom of Supercars, and none of that would have happened this time last year up until SVG and some of these guys start to come over. So it is a perfect synergy, and it's going to work out. I'm telling you, more motorsports need to lean into this because you can see Supercars on their social media tweeting about their guys over here. NASCAR was tweeting about Kyle Larson in IndyCar. Now, the waiver thing, I don't have the energy for it. That's a whole different thing. But otherwise, we're pushing Kyle Larson into the Indy 500. It's a good thing for everyone. It'd be great to see McLaughlin and Newgarden and some of those guys come over and do the double on the IndyCar side. Again, every time you're exposed to more motorsports fans, it's a win because at the end of the day, no matter if you're an IndyCar fan, an F1 fan, a NASCAR fan, MotoGP, Supercars, we all like to watch people go fast and compete. And that's something that you can sell people on.
Absolutely. You hit the nail right on the head. I think it is one thing to sit here and speculate who is better than who. It's another thing for guys to be willing to get on the track and actually prove it. And, you just kind of have to tip your cap for the willingness of the modern day driver to be able to jump in new seats and just say, hey, I'm going to give this a shot. Who knows? Maybe a NASCAR guy will go and run an Aussie GP race or Supercars race. I think it would be interesting as hell. It's just one of these things. You have no idea how any of the schedules work out, but it certainly is. You're 100%. I think the comment I couldn't agree with more is that I have started caring about Australian Supercars more than I ever would have because of some of the things that NASCAR and the Supercars have kind of gone back and forth with here. And I think that's a really cool thing. I think like the rising tide really does lift all ships, and I'm just excited to kind of see what the future holds.